Maldives has been at the top of our travel bucket list for years, but with price tags that made me want to cry, it wasn't in the cards for us price-conscious travelers, at least until now. We saved over $10,000 on this trip using miles and points, so join us as we explain exactly how we pulled that off and give you an honest, behind-the-scenes look at a Maldives vacation on a budget to help you decide if this is worth adding to your travel bucket list. So we'll cover all of your flight options from all corners of the globe in a second, but our journey to this island paradise actually began in Abu Dhabi, where we boarded a short flight that took us to the capital city of Malé.
Good afternoon and welcome to Maldives.
How you feeling? That's finally happening. 32 countries and I've never been so excited. From there, we were whisked away by a representative from Alila, who took us to this nice lounge where we grabbed a snack and waited for our seaplane transfer. I'll also talk more about those transfers once we get to our resort, but by the time we boarded our seaplane, it was starting to get a little dark and a little gloomy, and while I'd love to show you a dramatic, Instagram-worthy arrival with crystal clear turquoise water, let's just say we got used to the rain pretty quick on this trip.
Always the optimist, Aaron.
But there was no wiping that huge smile off Aaron's face because we had finally made it to our dream destination, and no amount of rain was going to ruin that. All right, well, this isn't going to be a Cara Innate level tour, but I want to quickly show you what you get for 25,000 World of Hyatt points with a beach villa so that we can compare it to the Overwater villa that we'll be moving into in just a few hours. Let's go check it out. Like I said, this is just the first of 2 different rooms that we're staying in on this trip, and while every blog and Instagram post will have you daydreaming of an overwater villa, which we will get to, honestly, this beach villa is where it's at. The fact that this is fewer points per night than the all-inclusive resort in Jamaica that I'm currently recording this at is still baffling to me. We had a huge living room, our own private infinity pool that led right out to the beach, a huge bedroom with a giant outdoor bathroom. I mean, seriously, what's not to like about this for 25,000 points per night? Despite the continued rain, we still had a great time in this first room, but before we check out that overwater villa, let's go over all of those nerdy mile and point details that I've been talking about that'll have you booking a trip like this for yourself in no time. All right, so there are some travel experiences where miles and points simply help you save some hard-earned cash. But then there are travel experiences that, at least for me, would otherwise be completely out of reach if not for miles and points. And the Maldives definitely falls in that second category. Forget about the lavish overwater, or in Cara Innate's case, underwater hotels, and don't worry, we'll get to those in a second. Just getting to this remote island nation can cost thousands of dollars. So what are your options to fly to the Maldives using miles and points? Well, in terms of direct flights, you actually have more options than you might expect, and while there aren't any direct flights from North America currently, there are plenty of one-stop connections in places like London, Doha, and the UAE, and don't worry, we're gonna go through some of the best examples I found, starting with Etihad and Emirates, both of whom are flag carriers for the UAE. Etihad is based in Abu Dhabi, while Emirates calls Dubai home, which are only about an hour from each other, but between these 2 airlines alone, you can connect directly to Malé, which, by the way, is the international airport in the capital of the Maldives, from pretty much every corner of the earth. Etihad and Emirates are not part of any specific airline alliances themselves, but you can still transfer points directly to their respective point programs, and they have direct relationships with many popular loyalty programs. Oh boy. That was really graceful. So through Emirates Skywards, I found wide open availability through a number of US cities connecting through Dubai for around 35,000 points and $269 in fees. But depending on the type of points you have, you could save on those fees by booking something like this Boston to Malé Etihad flight for just 40,000 American Airlines miles and $19 in fees. Or since American Airlines miles are harder to come by these days, you could look on places like Aeroplan or Flying Blue, which is actually where I found our
our Etihad flights from Abu Dhabi to Malé for just 12,000 points each. Now, obviously, those were a lot cheaper because we were booking flights directly from Abu Dhabi, but you can book Etihad flights through Flying Blue from all corners of the world.
Both of those carriers are obviously known for their lavish, over-the-top hard products, but if that's what you're looking for, then you might want to turn your eyes a little bit further west and focus on connecting to the Maldives through Doha on Qatar Airways. Of course, they're best known for their somewhat elusive Q Suites business class product, but this is another very well-connected airline with a dozen flights from the US alone, and since they are a One World partner, you have lots of booking options, like New York to Malé via Doha for 40,000 American Airlines miles, or 42,000 Alaska Airlines miles, which, at least at the time of recording this video, can be transferred from Amex by going through Hawaiian Airlines. But that isn't expected to last very long. But if you can pull that off, then why book a simple flight when you can book a Qatar flight to the middle of the Indian Ocean with Alaska miles that were transferred via Hawaiian Airlines?
Why don't you explain this to me like I'm 5?
I promise it is not that complicated, but if you want a simpler path to the Maldives, your next option, and the way that we're actually flying home, is on Virgin Atlantic, connecting through London. Using Daily Drop Pro, I found this insane IAD to Malé flight via London for just 13,500 Flying Club miles and $174 in taxes and fees, which is largely a result of Virgin Atlantic's new dynamic pricing model that, in this case, was actually really great. Because when we booked our flights before that change went into place, my flight actually cost 22,500 points, and even after getting the insane discount on Aaron's ticket using the Virgin Companion Seat benefit, which unfortunately is no longer available, this new dynamic pricing model would still be cheaper, especially considering the taxes and fees are now lower as well, which I am a huge fan of. There are certainly other airlines, but between those four, you shouldn't have any problems finding award availability, and they all offer everything from easy to find economy seats to some of the most premium aviation experiences out there. So go nuts.
Now, the last thing really quick before we get to the overwater bungalows, because why else do people come to the Maldives, a few things you need to be aware of. As you hopefully know by now, the Maldives is an island nation made up of over 1,000 different islands, meaning when you arrive in the capital of Malé, your journey isn't quite over yet. Every hotel is going to handle this a little bit differently, but most of the time you'll have the option to take either a seaplane or a boat from the actual capital of Malé to the island where your resort is. And be warned that these transfers are not cheap, and the cost of the transfer isn't typically loudly advertised when you're booking your resort. In hindsight, yes, I definitely should have done the research in advance and watched a great informative video like this, but we're staying at the Hyatt Alila, and our seaplane transfer from Malé to our hotel was, wait for it, $655 per person. Let me tell you, that was not a fun email to wake up to. Again, totally my own fault, and it wouldn't have really changed our accommodation decision anyway, but something that you do want to be aware of, because your transfer could very well cost more than your flight to Malé. And you don't really have many options, since typically the hotel is going to book this for you. I guess the good news about that is we were able to earn a ton of World of Hyatt points from that transfer, since the hotel booked it on our behalf, and therefore it showed up in our folio with all of our other expenses.
All right, now that we're warmed up to the sticker shock of this beautiful paradise, let's talk accommodations and what we've thought of our stay here, and most importantly, if the Maldives has lived up to the hype. So as you can imagine, for a place with this kind of reputation, luxury is the name of the game. You can find everything from Park Hyatt to Ritz-Carlton, Intercontinental, and everything in between. They quite literally are putting on the Ritz here in the Maldives, and Marriott took that very seriously.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
For the sake of moving on from that horrible joke, let's start off with the Ritz-Carlton Maldives. This is one of the nicest but also most expensive options from a major brand, starting around 100,000 points per night. So the only way I could really see that happening is if you had a bunch of 85,000 point free night awards from Marriott and maximized the 15,000 point top up benefit to cover the total cost. But otherwise, you're better off going with options like the Conrad Maldives, which admittedly is still pretty expensive, starting around 120,000 Hilton Honors points per night, which remember is the equivalent of 60,000 transferable points from Amex. But we actually made an entire video about that specific property when Kara and Nate stayed there last year, so I'll link to that down in the description if that is something you want to learn more about. And that is the property with the underwater villa, and yes, you can book that with points. You've also got the Waldorf Astoria, which is another luxury Hilton property, starting around 150,000 Hilton points per night, but since Hilton Honors Free Night Awards aren't capped in the same way that other brands are, many many argue that the Waldorf Astoria in the Maldives is actually the best possible place to use a Hilton free night award. So again, something worth considering if you do have some of those stockpiled. The Intercontinental from IHG also starts at well over 100,000 points per night, but if you're losing hope about your Maldivian adventure, don't worry because, as usual, Hyatt is here to save the day. So Hyatt has two Category 7 properties here in the Maldives with the Park Hyatt and the newer Alila where we're staying, and depending on the time of year, you can find rooms at each of these properties for just 25,000 points per night, which is insane considering cash prices can easily go above $1,000 per night. Now be warned that if you're like us and half the reason you came to the Maldives was to stay in an overwater villa, then those are base rates and that only includes a standard room. And in our case, we actually couldn't even book an overwater villa with points if we wanted to. So painful as it was, we actually used some of the money that we saved by booking our flights here with points and booked 2 nights using cash in this overwater villa and then 4 nights using points at 25,000 points per night. Definitely a patchwork way to see the Maldives, but we couldn't come all the way here and not spend at least 1 night in an overwater villa. Also, I don't think we've talked about this yet, but I do want to quickly highlight the insane benefits we got from our Hyatt status at this particular property. So first of all, breakfast was included, which probably saved us at least $50 every single day. Food's pretty expensive, it is the Maldives. We were also invited to a Globalist cocktail hour, which that particular night was basically free drinks and food. So between that and the upgrades, I'd say our Globalist status netted us about $1,000 in benefits on this 1-week trip alone.
I sort of glossed over it there, but that upgrade I mentioned was a pleasant surprise because we were supposed to spend 2 nights in a beach villa, 2 nights in an overwater villa, and then move back to the beach villa for our final 2 nights. But thanks to our Globalist status, they decided to just keep us in the overwater villa, meaning instead of paying $900 per night for 2 additional nights, we basically just paid 25,000 points per night.
Hyatt status for the win, overwater villa for the next 2 nights, free upgrade. Gotta love it. Significant difference in cash price, also no bats on the overwater villa.
Oh yeah, somehow the brochure forgot to mention that the Maldives has some of the largest bats in the world. Anyway, let's finally check out that overwater villa and wrap this thing up.
All right, so we just checked into our overwater bungalow here in the Maldives. So this is what $900 per night gets you, and let's see how it compares to our 25,000 point room that we just came from.
So it won't come as a surprise that this overwater experience was everything we had dreamt of. Another huge living room with a comfy bed, an incredible bathroom with one of the best views I've ever had from a shower, not to mention our own private infinity pool and hammock where we could relax all day and order endless coconuts.
Your weapon, my lady? Are you happy?
I'm very.
Finally got your coconut.
It's definitely a bummer that we weren't able to book this overwater villa with points, but like I said, our Hyatt status did help us out, and if something like this is on your bucket list, then I don't think you'll regret spending the cash, and the more time you spend here, the more you understand why stuff is so expensive.
I know I've been making fun of the price of certain things on this trip, and it's just because the Maldives is really expensive, but also I'm just a very frugal person. However, I'm a huge nerd and we actually just took a behind the scenes tour and it does kind of help justify why this place is so expensive. You kind of forget that other than the $15 coconuts, they literally have to bring everything here and make everything themselves, from electricity to clean water. Literally they have built a city on this island, so it does kind of help justify the high price tag. But also I'm just very frugal and love miles and points. So there are certainly lots of other hotel options, but in terms of miles and point redemptions, Hyatt is definitely going to be your best bet. But the big remaining question is, has the Maldives been worth it and lived up to the hype?
The overwater villa was definitely a bucket list experience, but you could also come here and book the entire stay for free at a beach villa and still have a trip of a lifetime, and you really can't go wrong if you ask me. Because despite having more hype and anticipation than anywhere we've ever visited, I'd say the Maldives absolutely lived up to the hype, and I hope we get to go back there again someday.
Well, after days and days of rain, we finally are ending our Maldivian adventure with a beautiful sunset, so definitely feeling grateful for that. But as always, if you want to start working towards your own vacation to the Maldives, then I'll leave a link down below to our top travel credit cards page where you can check out the latest welcome offers. And again, be sure to check out Daily Drop Pro if you want to save so much time, money, and points on your next travel booking. Again, I'm very biased, but I seriously cannot recommend that enough. We're going to soak up the little bit of sun that we finally got on this vacation. But as always, thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next week. What is that?
It's the fish.
That's a crab.
Sir,
I'd like to speak to you about your car's extended warranty.
We should blow our feet.
It'd be funny.